I have an outline, but once I'm in the content, years and years of experience are coming forward. And at first I was like caught up in like, oh, I totally effed up the chat and I totally whatever. But then I gave myself a few days. I listened back and I was like, this is totally brilliant. You can't find this stuff anywhere else on the internet.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. Many of us get stuck. We wait to create a program beyond private practice because we want it to be perfect before we launch it. My guest today is going to help you let go of that idea. She's letting us in on the iterations her programs have gone through. The business she has now is thanks to being willing to get started. Meet Reverend Maureen Cotton, an interspiritual minister serving the spiritual but not religious. She's a spiritual wedding coach and officiant with her business, The Soulful Wedding, which helps couples experience their wedding as a transformative rite of passage. Welcome, Maureen. I'm so excited to talk to you.
So happy to be here.
Okay, tell us about the first program that you created as your pilot. You ran, I believe it was a retreat.
It was a weekend-long retreat and workshop called Create Your Ceremony. So it was 4 engaged couples who were going to have a friend or family member officiate their wedding. People often ask someone to officiate, but they don't realize there's also designing the ceremony, writing the ceremony, choosing the rituals, picking a vow format, all of that. So the idea was to go through all of that and to do a lot of reflection and emotional work and reconnecting as a couple that allows those decisions to happen, and also those decisions like stir up deeper questions. So it was a weekend-long retreat that had all of those pieces together, and at the end, people had a comprehensive outline and plan for their ceremony.
That's amazing. That's a lot. Like just picturing as a couple going through that process. That's a really deep dive and coming out with something very tangible. So what surprised you? Well, first of all, did you have 4 engaged couples go through it?
So I just had one couple.
One couple. Okay, that sounds much better as a pilot experience.
Yeah, I was initially a little bit disappointed, but it's funny talking about it. It's almost 2 years later now, and I can just see so many things so much more clearly, and I'm planning to revive the idea very differently. But the first time I just had one couple, and they were both therapists. They were listeners of your podcast, Annie, so thank you. And I mentioned they were both therapists because one of the things I realize now is the idea of a whole weekend doing this kind of work, I think, is very daunting to the average person. But for a pair of therapists who are always doing education and retreats and inward deep dives, folks like that, they got it and they were drawn to the idea. But I think in the future, I'm not going to do the weekend format. And to be honest, at the end, they were exhausted. They gave me great feedback. They were really happy, but I could see toward the end, it was like, we traversed a whole lot of terrain, made a whole lot of decisions. And, the wedding, basically, one of the things that I really educate people on is basically planning a wedding stirs up everything unhealed in your life. Everything, including things you didn't know were there. So for me to create a container and say, we're going to go through it all, I'm like, okay, maybe I can take a step back and help people with like a smaller dose, at least at first for the program. And then they always have my one-on-one coaching if they want to go deeper in the future. But I think I learned I need to simplify the group offering.
Okay. And this is interesting. When people start their pilot with a small group, and this is really common, that one thing that happens is they start with the intention of a small group and they don't like quote unquote fill that group. They get like one person or one couple. And a lot of people are disappointed when that happens. And I'm always kind of like in the background cheering a little bit because I feel like starting one-on-one or one-on-two is such a beautiful opportunity to get things clarified, to give somebody a ton of value, like that person or that couple has won the lottery in a way. And like, it's never going to be quite that high touch again, potentially. And then, yeah, you get to figure out so much about like, oh, this was maybe too much to deliver for future couples, or I see all these things I want to shift. So
exactly. And as we were going through the weekend, because it was just one couple and they're a particularly self-aware couple, I said to them, like, let me know when you need a break. Whereas when you have a big group, like in the future, I'll have a better sense. I mean, first of all, I'm going to parse it out differently, but that allowed it to still be a good experience in that particular instance because we were able to pace it. Whereas if I had 10 couples, I don't know what would have happened in terms of ushering them through that depth of material. So absolutely, I think anytime you can start small and just find evidence for what works and then keep moving.
So then you did change it in future iterations. Like you created a very related but different offering. So what did you create next?
So after that, I actually kind of went the opposite direction where I decided to focus on the one-on-one because I was thinking to myself, how could I offer this in a group? I wasn't sure. And 2 years later, I can tell you what I'm thinking in a minute. But at that time, I was like, I'm not sure. And I'll say that this was new to me as a focus. Just the year before, I was in a whole different career as a photographer, as a wedding photographer. So I had lots and lots of insights about weddings and connection and memory and relationships and all that kind of stuff. But I was new to like professionally guiding people in this way. And so I think I also just needed more of what you said exactly, that when you start small, there's just a lot to learn about how people process what you're offering and what you're really wanting to do. There's so much to learn. So I know a lot of your listeners are therapists, so they may not need to take a detour like I did because they work one-on-one with people all the time and they're already seeing the patterns that emerge. And I think patterns is where we get led to group work. You can work with a group once you find the patterns and the common threads. For me, because I was newer to this work, I was like, I don't think I could do this with a group. I need to work with more people one-on-one. So I just have a much better sense of what are the common threads that happen. And that's how I would describe it now. At the time, I think I just felt like a little lost, where it's like, well, we need to go wherever this couple needs to go. Because this couple might be having conflict with their parents. This couple, one of them might be having religious trauma that is stirred by the wedding. Someone might be having grief. And so I think with the one-on-one, it's like you can follow people wherever they go. But then when it's the group, you're looking for like, okay, with all the different diverse things I've helped people with, what are those common core issues that we can begin to tap into?
Well, it's interesting. It's not that different, I think, for therapists in that, I mean, first of all, you've always worked with people really emotionally. You are a reverend. With a lot of therapists who maybe spend their days doing one-on-one work, they still have exactly the same process you just described when they're trying to turn it into something that's going to be structured and replicable. And so they're really in the same soup as what you're describing.
I think it's worth me throwing out. So one way to sort of take baby steps is to have a small cohort or just do the offering one-on-one. Another thing that ended up being really pivotal for me was just creating a really small offering.
Yeah. So your next offering was much smaller.
Well, so then I did a one-on-one offering, did a few different one-on-one offerings. But when I returned to the idea of group, I did a vow writing retreat. It was a single event. It was 2 hours. And everything just clicked into place for me in terms of the simplicity of like, I'm throwing the idea out there. I'm marketing it before I've written a full outline. Are people interested in this? When they sign up, what are their questions? It was really all of the same stuff that you kind of teach and create your program, but doing it on a microcosm was just so incredibly helpful. And right after I did that, I had, the ideas for my next 2 courses because I just saw everything come into place and it really boosted my confidence and like, okay, I really can just make an outline, turn on Zoom and deliver more than I even knew I could deliver. Like I have an outline, but once I'm in the content, years and years of experience are coming forward. And at first I was like caught up in like, oh, I totally effed up the chat and I totally whatever. But then I gave myself a few days. I listened back And I was like, this is totally brilliant. You can't find this stuff anywhere else on the internet.
Okay, this was with couples, right? Like this wasn't with other professionals, but with couples,
Correct.
not other like wedding professionals. Couples writing their vows.
Yes.
So that's like a very specific outcome you're giving them. And it was 2 hours. And when did you do this? Like how far into your
I did that at the end of August.
this year?
Yeah, just a couple months ago. We're speaking now in the fall. So into my new business about a year or so because I've been focused on the one-on-one.
Okay, so how did it go? Like how many people signed up for this?
So it was a small turnout, as far as these things could go. Because when I was putting it together, I'm like, this is so cool. What if I had like 50 people or something? I think I had like 9 or 10 people purchase. And I had about half of that live. Some out of the gate plan to do the recording. And I actually did a little intake form. So I knew ahead of time roughly how many people to expect. And I'll say about half those people were also already my clients. So I was already making their ceremonial, already doing spiritual coaching with them. And so I invited them at no cost, which I highly recommend because they were already on that journey. But the experience I had offering it is, like you said, it was very specific. It's like, we are going to get your vows done. Although in the sales page, it was also like, maybe you're just going to have a conversation you really need to have with your partner. Because the way that I was leading the vows, part of it was a question of values. Like, let's talk about the values that are going to help fuel your marriage, because that's basically what your vows can be about. Tapping into like promising to pursue and uphold those values. So it was perfect mini experience because if you really wanted to get your vows done that night, you could. But what would definitely happen is that you were going to reconnect to the purpose of your wedding, whether you did it with your partner or by yourself. So I was so happy when I just saw like, okay, people are writing to me and telling me they wrote their vows and they love them. And people are also saying that they found it restful, which like in today's world, I mean, that's a big win, right? And they're saying that they feel more grounded since their whole engagement began. So I was like, okay, I'm really giving this mini delivery. I did not have to spend the whole weekend with them and plan their whole ceremony to give them this kind of experience.
What did you charge for the workshop?
So I did early bird pricing of $45 and then pricing of $75. And I've already turned it into an on-demand course for $99, which is maybe what I should have charged all along, but I was just kind of feeling unsure. I wanted to make it easy.
I don't think it matters. Like, you know this about me. Like, I don't think where we price our pilot matters that much because it's really about setting a price that you're comfortable with and then knowing that this is the long game. And so, yeah, I mean, it seems also like that price, if you do it, especially if you do it again live, that price could be way higher.
Yes. And I do see it. I see the recording also as what you might call like a gateway product. So I think it's definitely worth $500 or more, even as a recording. But I'm going to maintain it as like, this is a really easy way to work with me, to learn my philosophy, to get the experience. And then hopefully some number of people will move into other offerings after.
Okay. Very cool. Okay. So tell us about what was the next one-on-one you created after that weekend?
Okay. So after that weekend in March 2021,
Wait, was it 2021 or 2020? I know you would know. It's your
2021.
Life. Okay.
It sounds funny.
Okay. Yes.
But 2020 was the initial pandemic year. So that's how
right.
I know it was.
So it makes it easy to remember. Okay.
So March 2021, I did that pilot with a single couple. And then I moved into crafting a one-on-one offer, which took me a very long time because I had a couple important personal side journeys to make along the way, especially because I was transitioning careers. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this one-on-one offering, but I still didn't really see myself as like a professional spiritual guide. That was like the next journey I had to have.
And now you do, right? Like now.
Absolutely.
That feels really clear.
I do now. It is so clear.
So you weren't just creating this offer, you were
I was
Like
transitioning
creating a new
careers.
identity. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we spoke over each other. So yes, I was not only creating a new offer, but I was transitioning careers. And in transitioning careers, I was moving into a new identity. And I had to fully move into that identity before I could really market it and put it out there and have faith that people should pay me uh, for this kind of time together. So having been a photographer all those years, I was always, in a way, a spiritual guide. I was always leading people inward and helping them with their identity and things like that. But there was a tangible product. There was something beautiful to look at, to share, to replicate. And so for me, becoming a spiritual guide professionally, I think I maybe did see myself as a spiritual guide, always kind of doing that kind of work. And I had worked as a hospital chaplain, but to really professionally be out there and be asking for money from the people I was helping, in the hospital, I wasn't collecting money when I was giving spiritual care. That was a really, really big transition. And that's when I was doing your mastermind. And it was so helpful for me to be in a room of therapists who are regularly paid basically just for someone talking to them. It was new to me to not have a tangible result of the work.
Yes. It's like I've been having conversations about this lately we don't always give tangible outcomes, but we give very important and describable outcomes.
Yes, and lasting. And lasting. And that's the interesting thing about being in the wedding industry. And in terms of growing my business and education and stuff, I've really been looking almost exclusively outside of the wedding industry because so much of the wedding industry is that day, that fairy tale day, the best day of your life, da, da, da. But this kind of work that I'm doing with people to help them be more in sync with their partner, understand their values, know why they're getting married, compassionately heal relationships with other people like parents. This is life-changing, lasting stuff. I'm not just making your wedding day more meaningful.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So what did this one-on-one offer look like in its next iteration?
So when I finally was able to pull it all together, it's called the Soulful Wedding Roadmap. And it is based largely on the process that I was already doing with my ceremony clients. So as an interspiritual minister, I am always really interested in how people are making meaning of a particular moment. And we might be drawing on religion or spiritual path, or we might not be. And especially when it comes to marriage, we're drawing on personal histories and things like that. So I had this whole process I would lead people through so that I could come to understand their values and their orientation to their spirituality. And of course, what happened was they were coming to understand their values and their orientation to their spirituality in a new way through the process. So it came out of like, oh, this process in itself is full of gifts and transformation. So the Soulful Wedding Roadmap was about offering that in and of itself and also making more space to go into some of these issues that come up. Grief that gets stirred, religious questions that get stirred, family conflict. I was starting to experiment with helping my ceremony clients with some of these issues slowly. I was a little nervous. I was afraid people would be like, hey, lady, back off. We're just trying to plan our ceremony. But if I said, any number of things, sometimes people just aren't hearing each other. Sometimes they're outlaying different visions for the future. Sometimes people in and of themselves have saying what they always wanted and then saying what they're expected and it's out of sync. And so I just started really slowly saying, hey, just because of the unique angle that I'm getting of the situation, like I'm noticing this. Do you want me to share with you a couple of things I've noticed or a couple questions? I'm big on questions. My work is really all about questions. My marketing is all about questions. Here are some questions that you might want to ask yourself or each other. And here are some questions that are going to just continue to come up in your married life in different ways. And so why not spend a little time with it today? So people were very receptive. And so when I created the Soulful Wedding Roadmap, it was largely based on that process in which I speak with each member of the couple separately, which is so important because I want to hear about their experience of the relationship, how they define their values, their spiritual heritage, things like that. And then I speak to them together. And then in between those steps, there's a transformative step that I always say, like, I'm not a part of. Like, just by them having first filled out a questionnaire on their own and then spent an hour speaking with me on their own, then they come back together and they both have new language and new questions so that there's a new conversation happening between them. And then I come back in to see where we can go from there. Basically, when we come back together with them, it's a 2-hour session, and half of it is somewhat planned. I have exercises, meditations, things I'm leading with them. And then the other half is open just to see really what they would like to work on that has been stirred.
Wow. So in that second half, that open half, do you find that they already have things they want to talk about, or do they end up having those things come up because of the first half of the meeting? Like what usually happens in the second half?
So usually I have an idea of what will happen in the second half from the first phone calls because I've spoken with each of them. So I kind of have a list of questions, and then what happens there? I think often I'll say to people, I'll start by asking, is there anything that's come up that you want to share or voice or things like that? And then that could take us there, or they could say, I'm not sure. And I'll say, well, I had a couple of thoughts, like, I'll share those with you, see what you think. So it's very organic and very intuitive. And, what happened in the first part of it, the first part of it is a mix of, I say like head and heart. So like we use some like heady exercises to identify some value stuff. And then I lead them through a guided meditation that helps them like reconnect with memories, often ones they haven't thought of in a long time, as well as generate a vision for the future, like totally from like an intuitive heart space. So it depends a little bit on the personality of the couple to some degree, but after being in that open heart space, I think it becomes very obvious, like, because then you're choosing from a list, like it becomes very obvious at that point, really.
So then what happens after that group call? Not group call, but the three of you on a call.
So I send people a summary, which I'm actually looking for a new word for my summary because it's really awesome. It's not just a summary, like you read Cliff Notes of something. I write it with really like head and heart very equally open, so it's kind of, this is the terrain that we've gone. These are the questions that have come up.
I feel like we should use, sorry to interrupt, Maureen. I feel like there's somebody listening who's like, it should be such and such. So if you know what it should be, or if you have an idea for Maureen, rather, email me and I'll send it to Maureen at info@coachingwithannie.com.
Yes, I love that.
Because you know how that just like group brain think.
Yes, thank you. Whoever is out there and doing some kind of work in the space of change that you can name it. So I write something that says what we've talked about and what questions I might like to continue working with. And I know for people, it's kind of like narrative therapy when they read it. Like, even though they were there in the session, like to see it kind of like summarized bird's eye view, I think is pretty powerful. I know it's powerful because people tell me.
Yeah.
I have just added, I haven't done this yet, I've just added video messaging support as well. So we have the session, they get the summary, and now via Marco Polo, I can answer some of the follow-up questions, because a lot of the questions that happen next are a lot of like, okay, so what's the wedding going to look like? If I've decided this about how I want to be in relationship with my parents, or this about my gender, or this about my community. And it can be wherever they are in their wedding planning. If they're early in wedding planning, maybe they're deciding whether or not they're going to elope or have a community wedding. Maybe they've planned their whole wedding, but now they're deciding, are they going to do parent dances? Are they going to walk down the aisle with their parents or not? Are they going to have a bachelor or bachelorette party that's meaningful to them, or how are they going to do it? So a lot of little questions come up about, now that we know what our values are, and now we're looking at what's standard for a wedding, we're like, what do we do? And that is a space where I can be extraordinarily helpful to people. Having been a photographer for all these years, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of wedding days beginning to end while being attuned to people's like emotional state. So while just seeing also the many, many different ways of doing things. So that's where that leads. So that whole process is the Soulful Wedding Roadmap. And if people like, they can start to add on my ceremony services. So we can then do a session where just in 1 hour, we can do that whole ceremony outline because of all the groundwork we've done. Then if they like, they can have me write the ceremony. So these are all services for people. If their friend or family member is doing the ceremony, that person can get a full script and they just have to focus on nailing it or adapting it. And then a small number of people a year I will also still officiate for.
Wow. Okay. And so most people probably take you up on the next steps, because I'm imagining you really want, like, once you've done all that work together, like, you really want to know, what does Maureen see for us? Is that right?
I think so. Yeah. Most of my couples who do the roadmap add on at least the ceremony design session, because I'm able to come to that session with ideas for rituals and adapting things, maybe even brand new rituals that come out of something they've done in their history. So I think a lot of people do see, like, okay, we're almost there. Like, we can actualize it in the ceremony design. And then with the love story, it's a mix, because it depends on who's officiating. And some people, them writing the ceremony together can be a beautiful experience. And I should throw in there that for me, I see the heart of ceremonies being a couple's love story. And a love story not just being like, we met on this day and moved in together this day, but really, here's how we have been transformed by our partnership. Maybe how the world around us has been transformed by our partnership. Here's what, and that ends up saying everything. You can optionally have a reading about the meaning of marriage, but you don't have to after you've told the story of how these two people got to this day. So some couples will write it together and it can be a beautiful experience. Some couples, the person officiating has that skill set of writing. So they'll just get the outline, which will include maybe a few bullet points about the love story. Like, you definitely want to tell this story, or you want to talk about how this part of you has changed, or something like that. So it can go either way at that point.
Okay. And for the, well, I don't want to say basic, for the minimal offer of the Soulful Wedding roadmap. Wait, Soulful Wedding roadmap?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. What's at this point, which I'm sure it's going to be going up, but at this point, how much are you charging for that?
$1,800.
Yeah, that's going to be going up.
I just doubled it.
Yeah, because I mean, we're talking about engaged couples who, for one thing, I mean, you and I have talked about this before, so I'm not just, if people are like, wow, why are you making this up? But like, people end up saving potentially a lot of money on their weddings if they work with you, because they get so clear on what matters to them, what doesn't matter to them.
They save money and they save hella sanity.
Yeah, they probably also do a lot of the things that they would otherwise pay for in couples therapy. Like, there's a lot of prevention of bullshit that comes up because of this.
Something that you said to me when we were in the mastermind, and I had a question about the mechanics of working with a couple, and you were sharing with me about your experience working with couples. And something that makes me want to work in the wedding time is that there is a higher likelihood, there's a really special space for transformation in the engagement, that I think maybe if you go to couples therapy after you're already married, it could take months or years to tune in to certain issues. Whereas while you're engaged and the ground is shifting anyway, whether you like it or recognize it or not, and your identity and the way you connect to lots of people, not just your partner, but also your family of origin and certain friend communities, all of that is changing. And so this is like the perfect little window, and you can have greater transformation and greater clarity in this little window. But then the painful thing is everyone is stressed and spending a ton of money, so they feel like they have less time and it strains the relationship, but it's actually, everything is changing. This is the perfect time. So yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that, because that was something you told me that I thought was really true, is like, you can have greater transformation in these few sessions than you might in years of therapy.
Yes, absolutely. It seems like you also have a way that you're helping people get out of a hustle wedding. Like, you're helping them get out of a default wedding or a hustle wedding. And that is another incredibly valuable part of this transformation.
Yeah, and I'll say briefly, one of the ways I think about that is a performative wedding. I think that your wedding puts you at the center of your community. It's a really special opportunity to be the center of your community. And I was talking with I had one couple I was working with. They're lesbian, interracial, polyamorous, like not your typical couple. And they were saying it cracks them up because they feel like there's so many things in life they're kind of always on the edge of. But they were saying to me, what's interesting about being engaged is that the only response to telling someone you're engaged is congratulations, right? Like, you're at the center for a moment. And do you use that to express who you truly are? And then it can be this really powerful moment of integrating identities. And that's part of the community witness, is that you have people from all different parts of your life together, and then you express who you are and then being witnessed. It's like, whew, that's amazing. That's some of the best stuff in life. That is the part that is like a once in a lifetime opportunity, not like, oh my God, it's my fairy tale wedding, but like truly bringing your whole community together to witness you. That's the expressing who you are versus performing an identity on your wedding day. And we all know exactly how that feels to be at a wedding and someone's like proving how in love they are, proving they have a fairy tale story. You're like, oh my God, knock it off. Whereas a different couple could be doing some of the exact same things, but if it's true to them, you're just like, how beautiful. The expression invites people and they want to be a part of it and celebrate it, whereas the performing kind of repels people. And once you're on that track, there's only one way to go. You keep amping it up because you're trying to prove. So that's how I think of it, as like a performative wedding versus really like an honest wedding, I guess.
An honest wedding, a soulful wedding. Yeah. Those are so fun to be at too.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get right back to that conversation. First, I want to tell you, registration is about to open up for Create Your Program. If you're thinking you'd like to create a high-quality, unique signature program, the first step is to create a pilot program and share it with the people who need it. Create Your Program is my 8-week small group step-by-step process to get it done. You're going to work on identifying a viable niche for your offer, you'll create your program, and you'll take some key steps to start growing your audience. Get on the waitlist now by going to rebeltherapist.me/create. Registration opens up on January 2nd, and we've only got 10 more spots. So get on the waitlist now so you know as soon as it opens up. I would love to have you. All right, let's get back to Maureen and find out how she has been building her audience. So, okay, I'm thinking about pricing more.
Okay.
And like, one thing that makes me want this to be more expensive is that like there's only, if you're doing this one-on-one and it is very time consuming for you, I'm just thinking like how many of these could you possibly do in a year and feel like, yay, another couple. And maybe that's partly my old, I used to be a couples therapist and I wanted to always feel like, yay, another couple.
I know where you're going with that, and I agree, and I would like to raise the price, and exactly what you're describing is what has me already looking back toward group programs.
I'm wondering though, do couples, you did this group program so you can really answer this, like are couples...
They don't want to be in a group.
Yeah. Okay. Is that true?
They don't want to be in a group, no. And I've talked to other folks I know who've done like vow writing workshops and they were able to create a nice group dynamic. But I actually, when I did my workshop, my retreat, intentionally did not make it a group dynamic. I set it up as a webinar. So you could not even have the cameras on. So when I think about returning to my idea of creating the Create Your Ceremony workshop or retreat, I'm still thinking through how I will manage the group, but I essentially will not strive to have it be like a group coaching experience in terms of people helping each other. I think people need to reconnect with each other. I don't want people even thinking about, oh, where's the screen and we're both on the couch. Like, you meet with more than one person on Zoom and then they have to think about where they are and you can see they're not comfortable. Like, I want people sitting however. So I don't think the group part will be the same as it would for like what you do, where you're really getting a lot of value from your peers. Although I'm definitely going to do something because it can help you to hear other people. But essentially, I'm not looking for like a group cohesion experience for them. I think my ideal would be to do a live run of it. And then because I'm not focusing on a group dynamic, I can turn that into an on-demand class so they can watch the classes and then have maybe like a monthly Q&A or a monthly office hours or something where I definitely still want to be able to address certain questions. I don't want it to just be like an instruction, but I think a hybrid would work well. That's what I'm starting to plan right now.
Okay. And so what I'm thinking when you say that is like that requires a much bigger audience, like that business model requires a much bigger audience. What's been working to grow your audience, and what's been working to, like, when you look at who's signed up for offers, how did those people find you?
A lot of people find me through Instagram.
Okay. And that must be partly about how great you are on Instagram and partly about your niche, because a lot of people, even if they have a big following on Instagram, don't find that it converts.
Well, I do need to get people over to the newsletter. So when I had people sign up for the vow workshop, most, if they weren't my client already, most came from the newsletter, and many came to the newsletter from Instagram. So I guess for me, a classic funnel, which everyone hates funnels now, but I basically got a little bit of a funnel situation going on.
Yeah.
But it's still very small, and which is such a relative concept. I think about this a lot, especially because, as you're saying, with a new kind of offering, I'm going to need a bigger audience. And I feel like I have seen how well it works with my current audience. And I have seen all of the ways that my message can be conveyed. And something that has really helped me is that I have come to think of Instagram, which is a space I spend time in almost daily, which not always good for our mental health, right? Like there's much to think about. But for me, I've come to think of it as a digital town square. And that has helped me be effective there, and it's helped me have good boundaries there. And so the first thing I will say about that is fuck the algorithm. Fuck the algorithm away forever. Never, ever, ever do you want to think, should I say it this way or that way because the algorithm? Should I make it a reel or that because the algorithm? Or should I post on Sunday or Saturday because the algorithm? Like, you really have to do it when you are there and ready with your message. And some of that stuff can be secondary. Like if you're liking posting in one way, so those who aren't familiar with Instagram, there's basically like 4 media within Instagram. There's the posts, which are on your grid. There's the stories, which are temporary. There are reels, which are short videos that Instagram prefers and shares those in a different way. So if you're really wanting to be found by random people, they say reels are a good way to do that. So there's a lot of different ways to play in there. And so sure, once you're there and you're comfortable, I kind of think of it as like going to the gym. And I say that as someone who like mostly hates going to the gym, but I've recently created the habit. And I first was like, okay, first I just need to literally get myself in the building at least once a week and not be mad about it and not be frustrated. You know, it's like, I just need to create the habit and get in there. It doesn't matter what I do when I'm there. I can walk on the treadmill for 10 minutes and leave. So I feel like it's similar with a space like Instagram. Like if you think of it as a square in your town, like just go and visit. You can just walk through and talk to nobody. You can buy one flower or one piece of candy and leave, whatever. Just see what's going on there and get comfortable there. And then you can experiment more. And I think the town square thing, like some days you might spend the whole day in the town square. Some days you might stay in your little house all day. And I think something I really noticed for myself, which I haven't heard people talk about, is the effect of like if you went to the town square and you had something you wanted to say and you handed out 3 pamphlets and left, people would be like, that was weird. Someone just came and threw a pamphlet at me and left. And that's like what scheduling is. Right? Like when you schedule your post, like you're not actually there. You're just throwing something out there, but you're not really there. Like Instagram is most effective when you're there actually available for conversation. But I find in terms of like the boundaries and mental health, it's really hard for me to post something, especially if it's provocative, and then just go back to work. Like there's a certain energy. I'm still kind of attached to it. And it's not because I'm a bad person or weak person or undisciplined person. It's because I'm a social being and I've said something. And I'm curious to know what people thought. And so I find it's more like, okay, I'm spending a little time in the town square today. Like I'm coming over to Instagram, I'm saying something, I'm listening. So again, just like conversation, like you're not just talking, you're listening. Also, I think that's where it's most effective.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And the other ways to use Instagram can be very minimal for a different purpose, though. I think what you're saying, like if you want to actually engage with people, yeah, you got to be there.
Yeah, if you want to do scheduling posts and things like that, I mean, if you're doing something that works for you, then, don't listen to me or anybody else. But I think it is a different thing where it's like, okay, maybe you're maintaining a presence, whereas I am really interested. I mean, honestly, I'm using it as a playground to experiment with my ideas.
And like a little bit as market research in a very like engaging way.
Yes. And the thing is, it's easy. I think it's tough because it's like we've seen social media become a corporate space, but it's actually easy. It's actually the space where you can show up unpolished. It's actually the space where you don't have to check for typos and whatever. And like we've forgotten that. But when you go back to that, you connect with people better because we're used to, and it's the difference between seeing a big like billboard in the town square versus bumping into someone who's like really cool and they're selling something and oh my God, you've been
I want that.
Exactly. And so for the kind of stuff I'm doing, it's very common for someone to say to me on a call, you talk just like you do on Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know. And they say it's a good thing. And sometimes they're relieved, especially if they have a difficult question about grief or religion. They ask me that, I answer, and they're like, I was hoping you would say that. Like, that's what you said on Instagram.
I love it. So how do you get people, or how do you encourage people to go from Instagram over to your newsletter? Are you like sowing those seeds often?
Yes. And I really just started my newsletter in July. It took me a long time to get to it. And I'm finding it extraordinarily easy, by the way. And I told myself I only had to do it twice a month, but I'm doing it every week. It just made it a habit. That's another kind of topic, another self-knowledge thing. I'm not a systems person, but so anything that's important, I just have to make it a habit. So Instagram made it a habit, and on the newsletter, I made it a habit because again, I'm not sitting down and having like a content day for the month. That would never work for me. Like I actually write my newsletter every week. It's been awesome. So in terms of connecting the two, after I launched the newsletter, I have very, very, very intentionally made sure that I'm asking people to come to the newsletter, which was hard at first. Just like being on Instagram was hard at first. And then I got comfortable there and people are following me and they're loving my work in philosophy, but I'm not actually making offers and asking them to pay me and work with me. So that's something that I've been focused on lately. So I will be sharing about something. And then, if you want to know more about this, come over to the newsletter. And I do have a freebie. So my freebie is 5 questions for a meaningful wedding journey. So again, all about questions. And if they come work with me, I'm going to start with asking them questions. So I have 5 questions from my questionnaire. And so they get 1 email a day. And that was really important to me because again, it's like, you don't want information overload. It's just like, even if they, the email says like, here's a way to work with the question. But even if they don't do any of that, but they just read it, it tucks in the back of their mind. Hopefully it'll produce some kind of value for them and their partner. So that's my freebie. And then I think almost every time I'm on Instagram, I try to do a newsletter link. And again, it's hard at first because you're like, didn't I do this yesterday? Didn't I do this 10 minutes ago? But as all of the business people will tell you, like there's a million billion things going on in people's day. And when you ask them to join your newsletter 10 times in a week, they have seen it 0 or 1 time.
That's right. Yes. As soon as we make that switch to thinking of it from the participant's point of view, but also this part's so important, like thinking of it as your future participant's point of view, not as just some random person. Because when we think about some random person, we can easily feel like I'm going to annoy that random person because they don't want what I'm selling. But you're only really focusing on the people who very much want what you're selling. And then, I need to be reminded many times before I'll take action.
Mm-hmm. Or I find when I'm following other people, sometimes I'll follow people, I like them, I think they're interesting, and I will have followed them for years, and then they say something, I'm like, oh, that's what you do? Or I knew they did that, but like, oh, that's the kind of result you got from, like, I didn't know. I never even, and so when I observe that over and over, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to just let people know how they can work with me. Let people know they can schedule a call today. Let people know how soon they could be, thinking or feeling differently about their wedding. How are you feeling about your newsletter?
Oh, I'm the same way as you. I write it weekly. Unless, like, when I was going away on sabbatical for 2 months, I pre-wrote those, and they didn't actually go out every single week. But I'm the same as you. I'm in a conversation, and I have a habit of, making sure my newsletter is ready every week. And it feels like, similar to you, I used to think batching was what I should do. because it's efficient or because that's what.
Well, and you like systems, so I'm actually surprised to hear that you don't batch.
Well, my habits are in systems. Like if you look at my Notion, everything is in there and everything has a checklist and everything has like a slot that it's going to go into. And I also really rely on habits. So yeah, I like both. But yeah, everything has to have a checklist because otherwise I find myself spending too much time on, wait, what am I supposed to do now? And that causes anxiety and dread. Whereas if I have a checklist that I open, even if the first assignment on that checklist is like, write the newsletter, I'm like, okay, that's my job. I'm going to get to it.
And I'll just say briefly, because I know from my own experience and being in multiple business communities online, this is a huge trip up for people to start a newsletter, to feel like, am I going to be able to say something every week, that kind of thing. And I think for me, when I said, I'll just do every other week, I just saw, well, two things. I saw how effective it was. Like I'd been for months building the Soulful Wedding roadmap. I launched my website. I posted about it like once, sending the emails. Those are the people who are signing up. The people who've seen the message more than once, who've seen it from different angles. And then like when I see the newsletter thing, if I don't remember it, I see it Thursday morning in my calendar, just a reminder, because it goes out on Saturday. And I just literally take a breath and I'm like, what's on my mind? And I just pick one thing and I just write it. And I try to remember to have an offer in it. I do forget sometimes because I'll write something really, really interesting and people will write back. And I even had a time where I had a tip jar. And so I got some tips from people who would never be my client. So I was like, that's cool. I was like, but actually I should probably just focus on the people who might be my client. So I have to remember the offers in there. But otherwise, I just take a thought that's on my mind and flesh it out a little bit. And that's it.
Beautiful. And you're saying it works in terms of engagement and in terms of those being the people who
sign up. Yeah. People who make a call and then purchase or who join the workshop, things like that.
Yes. I love that. So what would you say you're most looking forward to in 2023 in your business?
I am looking forward to the possibility of having my Create Your Ceremony course as an on-demand asset, which will free up a lot of time and space to experiment even more with how I do the coaching, because I have ideas all the time. I have, if I just started working on my list of ideas, I'd just be busy for 5 years. But of course, we have to go through a process to figure out which the good ideas are and stuff like that. And I feel like when I'm always just serving clients one-on-one, I just don't get that space. So I really am excited, which is new to me because I've always been like, you have to be with people one-on-one. That's the only way. But I'm actually excited about possibly shifting in to be more of a business owner and having a course, and the course is available and I'm supporting the course and I have more creativity, more energy to do different kinds of events. I have lots of ideas for events, little educational things or different kinds of spaces. And so I would love if I could just get a little bit of a baseline and operations from a course. That's my big goal for next year. And I know that it will make other creative endeavors possible.
Fantastic. Are you going to raise your fees for one-on-one in 2023?
Almost definitely.
Okay.
Almost definitely. Yeah. As I told you, I did just have a fee raise.
Yes. Yes.
But it's a little bit of a journey there. But I think I'll also be looking at the puzzle pieces of how much is this bringing in, how much do I need for that? And I do think with it still being a little bit of a new offering, I am a little bit in that space of just like being a little hesitant about making it too expensive and feeling like it is already a big investment. So I'm still in that dance.
Here's one of my dreams for you. Okay. Is like you're creating this lower cost offer, which requires less. It's got you in it, but it requires less of you moment to moment. Gives you also permission to charge a lot more for the one-on-one because you know you have an offering there for folks.
I'll take that dream. Thank you, Annie. That's good. And I think it's like, because sometimes people say, make sure you have fewer offerings. So I'm like, do I have too many offerings? I feel like the way my brain works, I really, really like having the different offerings. And so I've actually even slightly separated, like people can hire me for just a ceremony design session. I didn't used to have it that way. I actually had a coaching moment with Rachel Rogers that helped me kind of see the person who might be looking for the spiritual coaching piece and the person who's looking for the ceremony may not overlap as much as I think. And so giving them each their own roadway in.
Mm. So you've got probably 3 offers, but one offer that like is like an accordion and that it can expand in different.
Oh, I hadn't thought it was accordion, but that's awesome. Yeah. So there's lots of ways to work with me because I have my gateway offering of the vow workshop. I hope I will have my create your ceremony retreat or workshop. I hope that will become like the flagship. Then I have this Soulful Wedding roadmap, and then I have my ceremony services. And then on the side, I do general spiritual coaching just because people do ask, and I get a lot of wedding adjacent clients in that. So people going through any kind of discernment or transition. So arguably, maybe I'll pare it down a little bit, but I actually love that I have people that I go deep into certain aspects with over here and over there. And just the way my mind works, I actually need the multiple things. If I didn't have those multiple things, I would probably like start another new business over there somewhere. But because I want to focus on the Soulful Wedding, I love getting to work with people in the different ways. So I think I'll probably often continue to have a few offerings, and to your point, be charging more, so in the future, still officiate 5 weddings a year, but at like $5,000 because of like the whole depth that they get and giving that a certain level. And so I'm still, and what I will learn over there will still inform what I bring to the courses when I update them and stuff like that.
I know I always preach simple business model, but yours, I'm not mad at yours. Not that it's up to me, but I'm not mad at yours because it's not like you have a whole bunch of group offerings. I think that gets really like, unless you have a humongous team and a humongous audience, that gets difficult, beyond difficult. Anyway, yeah, hearing your outline makes sense.
And I feel like I'm really teaching the same thing everywhere. I'm teaching that your wedding is a rite of passage, that getting married is a change and initiation, and what do you want it to be? Doing all of those things in a value-aligned way. So it's like literally if you were taking my 2-hour recorded piece, or if I am like holding your hand to ask these questions with your partner, it's really essentially the same. So the way that they inform each other, I think kind of enriches each piece.
Yes. Thank you so much, Maureen.
Thank you, Annie.
Learn more about Reverend Maureen Cotton at thesoulfulwedding.com. I want to thank Cosmo Palms for editing this podcast. If you found this episode supportive, please share it with your favorite therapist or healer. That is absolutely how we reach more people. And thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.